Now, before we go and have some lunch, I have the incredible pleasure of introducing us into our first ever real award series for Western Sydney Leadership Dialogue. We're in the business of recognising excellence. We're in the business of encouraging collaboration. We're in the business of trying to not only talk about being brave, but try and be brave ourselves, so we can't expect of our regulators and our investors what we wouldn't ask for ourselves. And we think it's appropriate to stop along the way and recognise some success. So you'll see in your program, some of these are unveiled and some are about to be unveiled. But we start with what we've called the Patrons Prize. And in recognising our patrons, which Nicholas Francis Hugo Grinder, the chairman of our patrons, with us in the room today, another 5 distinguished New South Wales men and women who help us. Nick Grinder, the founding chair, Premier Emeritus and the founding chair of Infrastructure New South Wales. Cameron Klein, the former head of National Australia Bank and now on the Foundation Board of Western Sydney University. Peter Shergold, Professor Peter Shergold, the Chancellor of Western Sydney Uni, the former Head of Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, and the man leading the government's approach to resettling refugees, largely in Fairfield. To Craig Knowles, the former Minister for Planning, Minister for Health, member of the Westmead Children's Institute, one of the distinguished planning ministers this city has had the pleasure of being, and the ultimate public servant, Kerry Schott, Chairman of the Moorebank Intermodal Company, chairman of many other things. I mean, one of the strongest advisors to government for many years. I get to call upon their collective genius, their wisdom, their governance, so that we deliver our organisation well. On behalf of those 5 patrons who voted for these awards, I'm delighted to start the process. The first award we had for an excellence in public policy was distinctly to recognise, as I said, in a time when there's simply not enough bipartisanship in Australian politics. We thought appropriate at a day we come together to talk about the future of Badgerys Creek, which is the greatest catalyst in Western Sydney, to what are 2 blokes who I first knew at Sydney Uni when they used to fight each other like cats and dogs. And ironically, I was in coalition with one of them on the Liberal side to take on the loony lefty as he was then. I realised he was a decent bloke later on. But these guys, titans of student politics at Sydney Uni, Joe Hockey and Anthony Albanese, who many years later came together in a spirit of bipartisanship to lead both of their parties on one of those brave decisions we talk about, we dream of, but rarely happen. So the first of our Patrons Prize Award in partnership, the Honourable Joe Hockey, the Ambassador of the United States and the former Treasurer, and to Anthony Albanese MP, the Shadow Infrastructure Minister and former Deputy Prime Minister, for their bipartisanship in working to deliver Badgerys Creek Airport. Go. As I call Albo up, we got a message from Washington just sent through.
Well, thank you, Chris, for this wonderful honour, which I am sharing appropriately with Anthony Albanese. It's been quite the fight that has extended apparently for more than 70 years to get a second major airport in Sydney. It would not have been possible if there wasn't the bipartisan friendship, mateship and agreement between myself and Anthony so that we could, in effect, corral all the special interests to deliver what will be a fantastic piece of infrastructure that will create tens of thousands of jobs in Western Sydney. I also want to thank Tony Abbott, because if he hadn't have backed my initiative in the 2014 budget to deliver the money to make the airport happen, then it wouldn't happen. We've already built $2 billion of infrastructure in Western Sydney, and together in partnership with the New South Wales Government, there's no doubt this airport is well underway, and it's being led very ably by Paul Fletcher. So I say to you all, it wouldn't happen if we didn't come together. All sides of politics working for the common good. Here in Washington, I get an even better perspective of how important that is for the benefit of the people here and benefit around the world. So I'm very excited and very proud and greatly honoured to be the beneficiary of this recognition, but significantly, it's my great honour to be part of a great legacy for the very hard-working and fantastic people of Western Sydney. Thanks very much.
Would you please welcome his partner in crime and the former Minister of Infrastructure, the Shadow Minister of Infrastructure, the former Deputy Prime Minister, and possibly the future Minister of Infrastructure, the Honourable Anthony Albanese.
Thanks,
You've got to go photo. Smile to me. Just before I ask Albo to say a couple of words, and he's actually in conversation on here after lunch, but we should also make mention, I keep reminding myself, the federal government's involvement, particularly this bloke, for it probably is tougher campaign to get the Moorebank intermodal developed too, so amongst other things. Anthony.
Look, thanks very much, Chris, and it is indeed a great honour, and a particular honour, I think, to share an award with Joe Hockey. It's entirely appropriate, and I thank the patrons for that. I ran in 1996 my first election campaign based upon building Badgerys Creek Airport. It took a while, and we looked in government when I was appointed the Transport Minister. We looked genuinely at other options. We looked very closely at Wilton. But what we came up with, each and every time it was examined at arm's length of politics, was that Badgerys Creek was the best site. It was the best site because of where it was located. It was also, importantly, the best site because of the best example of forward-thinking planning I think Australia has seen. The decision of the Hawke government to corral the area around Badgerys Creek means that you can genuinely minimise the impact on communities around that airport. It means, for example, that you can have essentially a people-free fly zone at night to the southwest of the airport that doesn't impact on communities. And when I received that report, it is true that we worked in a bipartisan way. I remember getting Joe around to my ministerial office, and he said, no, we're right for Wilton, mate. We'll be right. I said, well, actually, it's going to be Badgerys. And I went through with him, with Scott Morrison, with Malcolm Turnbull, the processes of where, and Joe was the point man to come back. We actually went to Cabinet a number of times on the issue and got the planning underway. One of the things, though, that we couldn't get prior to an election was a rock-solid commitment to bipartisanship. I don't want to rain on Joe's recent comments there, but there was one person who couldn't be guaranteed not to say no. And all it would take would be one, because some people on my side of politics who are opposed to the project would also say no. So we agreed essentially that post-2013 election, whoever won, we'd really get on with it. And the announcement had to be early in the term. And the Abbott government does deserve credit for making that announcement. And I think Bill Shorten deserves credit for backing in the judgment that this really was a vital project for Sydney. It is a great example of what you need in that long-term infrastructure delivery. You do need a level of bipartisanship. There's too much partisanship, I think, in politics at the moment. I think that's a general comment, and it's not a criticism of anyone, it's a criticism of everyone. And I do think this stands as an example of what can happen when you get it done, because there's no doubt that the people of Western Sydney, certainly in Jeff's comments, really just want us to get on with it. So thanks very much.
Cheers, mate. Next award is really to recognise career achievement for all the political bipartisanship we spoke about, which eventually got Badgerys Creek over the line, and even more so for continuing the fight, as Whitlam said before, to keep national government engaged in the business of cities. One person stood as a titan in the bureaucracy in Canberra. He's recently retired as the Secretary and the Director of Infrastructure and Regional Development. He's moved over to the other part of infrastructure, into communications. Would you please make welcome, recognising his career achievement, Mike Murdoch, AO. This is a bloke who fought through the long and hard years when Canberra wanted to be a rural development agency, and he kept reminding him that it had a responsibility in cities for a career. Beautifully done, Michael.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Smile for the little birdie over here. Here we go.
All right.
A couple of good-looking roosters on stage here, let me tell you. All yours, mate.
Thank you. Chris, and to the dialogue, to the patrons, thank you very much. It's a great honour. Thank you very much. The level of conversation that's happened here this morning couldn't have taken place 10 years ago. And the way in which the planning of this city under Lucy and the Commission, the way in which the senior bureaucrats in New South Wales, Jim, Tim Reardon and others came together is a real standout about, and why I think Tim's absolutely right in his comments earlier. This city and this country have a great future because we are sorting out some of these really hard long-term issues. Thank you very much for the recognition. Coming here this morning has really made me miss transport and infrastructure even more. I've realised that building an airport in Western Sydney is very easy compared to rolling out fibre. So thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and thank you very much for this recognition. It's much appreciated. Thank you.
When that airport opens, there's one name that'll loom large on maybe the second runway, Mike, the Mike Murdoch runway. Truly an incredible servant of Australia, of infrastructure, and of the cities of Australia, as well as its regions. So, Mike, congratulations. Our last award, again, in recognising excellence in public policy, bravery in public policy, leadership in public policy. As we've heard today, while we're pretty proud of only 4 or 5 years into the Western Sydney Leadership Dialogue and being part of the role and Committee for Sydney and others to the Western Sydney Chamber to change the debate about Western Sydney, we couldn't have imagined the accelerator we would have in having someone like the leadership of Lucy Turnbull and the Greater Sydney Commission to, if I hear one more person whinge in the inner city, that Greater Sydney Commission, it's just about Western Sydney, isn't it? And how it has changed the debate to have Western Sydney at the very core of the discussion of Sydney, not as the poor relative, you know, somewhere way out west, or if you're in the eastern suburbs, somewhere anywhere over the Anzac Bridge. The thought that we had at the very core of government, people like Jeff and Lucy, Sarah and the other commissioners, led ably by their Chief Commissioner. Would you please make welcome Lucy Turnbull, Urbanist Award winner.
Thank you very much, Chris. Okay. Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. Well, Chris, and to the patrons, thank you very much for this award, which I very much appreciate, but think it is actually a group award. There should be a lot of other names on it, but I thank you for your generosity in putting my name on it. And I'd like to acknowledge my fellow Commissioner Jeff, who is he's actually the king of the Western Sydney Airport strategic planning focus. I take responsibility for GPOP, but I couldn't possibly do my job without Jeff and without Sarah, who was not just a personal opinion of mine, but who is the greatest planner in Australia, our CEO, Sarah Hill. So it's very much a team effort. And we go on to try to make sure that our city, our Greater Sydney and Western Sydney, of course, and our central city around Parramatta is not only livable and lovable, but prosperous and sustainable too. Thank you very much.
There's the young man at the back. Where's Andrew Fong? Where's he? The back of the room there, a young student from the Western Sydney Academy, the best of the best at Western Sydney Uni. The poor bugger has both Lucy and I now as his professional mentors. So we're triangulating on Andrew. It's a name you'll hear a lot of going forward, and it's tribute to Lucy's role putting back in to be part of mentoring programs as well, so passing on the legacy. So thank you. Now, our last prize is the now coveted, soon to be very much coveted in its inaugural year, Project of the Year in Western Sydney. Where else appropriate in a summit specifically designed for infrastructure and property in the Great Golden West, we launched the Project of the Year. And to make that award, might I call to the stage the Chairman of the Board of Patrons of the Western Sydney Leadership Dialogue, Premier Emeritus, Founding Chairman of Infrastructure New South Wales, Nick Grinder AC.
Thank you, Chris. And because I've now got the chance, can I say I agree with Mike Murdoch? I only caught the last 15 minutes or so of the panel, and it couldn't have happened. Not sure it could have happened 5 years ago, much less 10 or 15. And while there is a way to go, I think there has been tremendous progress, and all the people involved deserve a great deal of credit. Now, I think I'm the only patron who's living and able to move and isn't so old as to be completely decrepit. I don't think I see any of my other patron colleagues here, so that's why I get to present this. And I ought to say we're very conscious of governance and all the things that would otherwise get parts of the media, most of the media, very excited. When I announce this result, you will see that there is, in a sense, a conflict because some of the people involved with the patrons are also involved with the project. So if anyone here, and I'm sure it doesn't apply, if anyone is worried that this wasn't the epitome of good governance, you can cease worrying. The person concerned wasn't part of the decision. So the winners for the project of the year, and the winners are sort of plural, Western Sydney University, Charter Hall and John Holland, and the project is the Western Sydney University Parramatta CBD campus.
I might invite Deputy Chancellor Genevieve Gregor and Bill Saramaris, who's in the room as well, to join us with the executives involved in the development. Genevieve, I can't see Bill, but Genevieve, Deputy Chancellor of Western Sydney University. She was also in charge of the Finance Committee, had to agree to pay for it. So it's particularly... Thanks, Jen. Do you want to...
So Western Sydney University's strategy is actually about securing success, and it's actually unashamedly student-centric in its focus. So the Peter Shergold building at 169 Macquarie Street, Parramatta, is about delivering for our students a world-class experience and educational facility. 60% of our 44,000 students are first in family to be tertiary educated. 31,000 of our students reside in Western Sydney. The character of our students are they're aspirational, determined, and also very deserving of this flagship building. So the Board of Trustees and the Executive wanted to deliver with our partners, Charter Hall and John Holland, a building which was integrated in the community, adjacent to and additive to the integrated transport hubs, technology-led and integrated. And we feel at Western Sydney University that we've delivered for Western Sydney with this building. So please come and visit. We'd love to show off the building, and in particular, our integrated learning spaces are creating a bit of a storm throughout the education space globally, and we've had visitors from all over the world come and see our spaces. We're delighted to receive this award and be recognised. So on behalf of the board and also the executive, thank you.
We've got a board meeting tonight, we might be popular, but I want to pay tribute in knowing that building and what we tried to do in these awards, and I'll run through the finalists, which I forgot to do in advance, I'm sorry, is that the transformational nature. If you haven't been to Parramatta recently and seen this building and gone inside this building, a level of technology Parramatta's never seen before, and Western Sydney hasn't seen, and needs to be replicated in many other places, both at WSU and other university downtown campuses, what Science Park will do, the changes that are being made, and that it really was a worthy winner of this award according to our patrons. Maybe with the benefit of my AV people, we might quickly look at the tough competition in year one for this. Opening with classic piece of infrastructure, the M4 road widening for WestConnex, and what achievement to go back and retrofit a road as part of a stage. Duncan Gay, seminal, the deity, the vision behind, Mary Ann Graham from the Motorway Corporation is here, Tony Shepherd and others, Stuart Ayres now, an incredible team that is giving us a much better connection. We're talking about the metro coming. The first real connection between the two CBDs is a widened, improved M4 WestConnex, and pay tribute to the RMS and the City Motorway Corporation and those who have been heavily involved. Next, so we have the university. Onto to TAFE, the Transfer Technology Centre at Wetherill Park. Another fantastic investment, as I said earlier, the need for new investment, more investment in TAFE, not to treat vocational education as the poor relation of tertiary study. And it starts with great buildings, work there at TAFE at Wetherill Park. It's been a tremendous project, and we pay tribute to those who have been involved in its development and those who will staff it to bring through the technology graduates of the future. In the great city of Macarthur, and the second WSU project, in partnership with South Western Sydney Local Health District, to develop the Macarthur Clinical School at Campbelltown Hospital, an incredible new facility that gives people like Lindy Dietz the courage to talk about Campbelltown being an education and medical science hub of the future, based on great architecture, great need and great learning that's happening in that centre. To the Fire and Rescue Academy at Erskine Park, with the Altus Property Group and First State Super, who've come together to develop this new complex in Erskine Park, which really gives, moving out of its old home to take a new home in Western Sydney. It's taken a level of technology again to another level, all of which have been great signs of public sector driven projects, and maybe it's the change in cycle. The last project, of course, the Inglis Riverside Stables, a partnership between Inglis and Accor, who've, a classic move, taken the old Inglis stables at Randwick, where the world would come to buy horseflesh at Easter, and moved it to southwest Sydney, and also having Accor have the courage to invest with a five-star hotel in the region. It's pretty indicative of the changing nature we're going through. I want to particularly pay tribute to all of those projects that were shortlisted for our Project of the Year. We hope this award goes on as the cycle develops, and eventually Badgerys Creek might even be a project that gets up here in hopefully under 10 years' time. Metro trains, all the infrastructure and the development that's coming that will populate this award, and we help drive excellence. I might now pass over to my dear friend Rowan Barker, who's going to let you say a few words and let you go and have some lunch, and then come back afterwards for a bit of meat in the afternoon for some serious policy discussion. Thanks, Rowan.
Thank you, Christopher.